medicine, I talk about it as an escalator. You graduate med school, you get on the bottom of the escalator, you gradually move up.
Mm.
Uh, it's an escalator. It's really tough to get off when you're halfway between the floors, and the top there, when you reach 70 or 80 years of age, you can step off easily. But along the way, it's difficult, really difficult to get off.
Welcome to Medical Portraits. My name is Carl, I'm a physician, and in this podcast, I talk to inspiring doctors who have extraordinary stories to share. My guest today is Simon Ling. He's a pediatric gastroenterologist, academic and executive director of High Impact Medicine, an organization that helps doctors maximize the positive impact they can have in the world. Simon's journey goes far beyond his clinical work. He began asking questions like, how can doctors do the most good? And what does it mean to choose a career not just for personal fulfillment, but for global impact? In this episode, we talk about his path into medicine, global health, and eventually effective altruism. Thanks, Simon, for taking the time for this conversation. I'm very excited to have you here. You have quite an interesting career path behind you, and we're going to look into that. But I want to start with the basics first and understand a little bit what got you into medicine in the first place. Why did you make the decision to study medicine? Was there anyone that influenced you? Was it just kind of interest in the topic? What made you choose it?
Yeah, thanks, Carl. It's great to be here and have the chance to chat with you. So what got me into medicine? The family sort of funny story is that when I was about 4 or 5, I used to play in a little tent in our back garden as a doctor to my stuffed animals. I guess maybe there's lots of doctors with that story behind them. But for me, I then completely left that behind during my teenage years at high school and actually became really interested in physics and math. And that is the direction I thought I was going to take right up until my final year at high school when the time to apply to universities came. And at that time, and this is a little while ago now, just around 1980, 81, I guess, my dad was well ahead of his time, and he took me and my brother, one of my brothers, up to an office in London where we did a vocational aptitude test. And it was on these old computer cards that you used to have in those days, computer readable cards. I just remember sitting there going through dozens after dozens after dozens of these little questions. And what popped up out of that when we got the results was the idea of medicine. And so, fortunately for me, I pulled out of the plan for physics and math. And I had this real obsession with astronomy at the time. So I was kind of heading into that very hardcore mathematical science kind of area. And instead, I redirected myself towards medicine because as soon as I read that in this report of my vocational thing, I thought, yes, of course, that's totally me. So that's how I ended up in medicine. I was lucky because in those days we did A levels at high school, and I did four, one of which was math and one was advanced math. My math, I got an A in. My advanced math, I got an E, which I read as meaning I'd found my level in math and I was not going to do well if I tried to take that further. So I think it was a good thing to move out of the mathematical physics kind of area and into medicine.
Yeah, it's interesting to see kind of what alternatives people might have chosen right when they started out and then eventually decided for medicine. But I realized the backstories are very different, right? There are people who wanted to go rather into arts and others maybe into languages and some people in kind of the science direction, which is somewhat related. But yeah, maybe the life science aspect of it got back to you. Maybe the fascination for maths and numbers, I was just thinking, comes back in a different form. But maybe we'll get to that, like when we talk a little bit about effective altruism, that is also kind of based in numbers, I would say. So maybe there's that's where a little bit of a connection is there.
Yeah, I think that there may be that. And prior to my involvement with effective altruism, I spent a lot of time, as we may talk about, in clinical research activities, which again has a sort of numbers
Yeah.
side to it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so you did your med school in Scotland, right? And then also part of your residency in the UK. And at one point you made the transition to move to Canada. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Why did you make that change and how was it for you?
Yeah, so my early life was all in the UK. I was born and raised just outside London and ended up at the University of Edinburgh Medical School, which I loved. And at that time, I was really interested in global health and development. I'd actually spent a year before medical school in Kenya, living in a small village close to the coast there, teaching in a school with an organization called the Project Trust, which is still running today. And out of or during med school and in the early years afterwards, I pursued some sort of parallel activities with my medical training in global health. So we collaborated with a professor in what's now Mumbai, then was called Bombay, doing a infant nutrition study in an urban slum area in Mumbai. And I spent some time in Tanzania and Botswana in hospitals there. And then, because this started to become a direction that I thought I was going to really pursue seriously in my career, I took a research fellowship and went to Dhaka, Bangladesh, where we set up a randomized controlled study of zinc supplementation in acute malnutrition. Um, that was a great learning experience, amazing learning while I was there. Um, and at the same time as me being in Dhaka, there was a physician called Dick Hamilton, who was a pediatric gastroenterologist, a Canadian, who was on sabbatical at a sort of later part of his career pre-retirement. And he was the grandfather of the division of pediatric gastroenterology that he had set up here in Toronto. And he saw what I was thinking about trying to achieve in my career, and he said, "You should really think about Canada. I think you'll find there structure to academic careers that you haven't been exposed to in the UK, and which will, yeah, I think you'll really like." So I sort of took that on. Uh, I initially went into pediatric GI training in the UK, and that comment about Canada sort of sat with me and lived with me. And a couple of years later, as I was getting towards the end of my training, I came to do a fellowship for a year here at Sick Kids in Toronto. I loved it. The family loved the city. We went back to Glasgow to a consultant position there. And 3 years later, we were on the plane back to Toronto after a job offer to join the staff here.
Yeah, and you've been there ever since, is that correct?
Yeah, that was 2003 when we
Yeah.
came, and we've been here ever since. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So kind of the that encounter in your residency was kind of the groundworks and maybe also the inspiration for the way that your career went onwards like after the residency. What was it that that kind of sparked your interest about pediatric gastroenterology? What was it that fascinated you and also about the academic aspect?
I think, first of all, it has always been pediatrics. For me in med school, actually, there was a point where I thought I was in the wrong thing until finally I hit pediatrics, and it was like someone had turned the light switch on, and I saw what medicine was all about. So for me, it's always been pediatrics. I think then the global health sort of interest and my experience in the hospitals in Tanzania and Botswana and in Mumbai um, built this interest and the beginnings of some understanding of the kind of problems in nutrition that was so central to a lot of the challenges in child health that were being seen in those areas. And that, of course, led to the study that I set up in Dhaka. And so from that interest in nutrition, which clearly has a gut related aspect to it, it's a small step into the subspecialty in pediatrics, which is usually termed as pediatric gastroenterology, hepatology, and nutrition. So I came into it through the sort of nutrition pathway. I actually spent most of my time here in Toronto focused on liver disease. But the nutritional aspects of these diseases are always very central. So that was the sort of small step into gastroenterology.
Yeah. And oftentimes the reasons to go into a specialty aren't always the same as you progress, right? Sometimes the motivation changes. What would you say, like after the years, what's the thing that keeps you motivated? Like what is the aspect of your work that you still really enjoy when you want to break it down?
That's a great question, actually, because it does change over time. I think core to what I've really always found the most rewarding is the patient interaction, actually. I guess I'm someone who's always prioritized that. I think that the doctor-patient, in our case in pediatrics, doctor-family relationship is so important and so powerful in terms of what can be achieved for patients. And at the same time, I get immense reward out of that sense that I've really connected with the family. I've taken the time to connect, to communicate effectively, and try to help them understand what's going on and sort of move them forward in their journey towards hopefully resolution or at least understanding how to live with a chronic condition that they may have. We see a lot of patients in the sort of tertiary level academic care where I've spent most of my career, a lot of patients who have been through multiple doctors before they get to you, never quite getting the answers that they're looking for or that they're expecting. And I don't always give them the answer they're looking for. But I think just taking the time to understand where they're coming from and the time to explain why what they're thinking doesn't necessarily map onto what the doctors have been thinking can really be a powerful moment in their journey with chronic disease. So that's something that I've always loved. At the same time, I've recognized a desire within me to make a difference and to try to do something that's beyond just looking after individual patients. And by saying just, I don't mean to minimize the key importance of that because it's such a powerful and important thing. But still, within me was that desire to be involved in things that are elevating my impact beyond the clinic and the inpatient ward. And that led me to pursue the academic side of my career, clinical research. And as I gained more experience and more publications and understanding of diseases and the ways in which they're researched, that led me to the opportunity to be engaged in clinical practice guideline generation with the societies and ultimately with the WHO, was another really immensely rewarding part of the career.
Interesting. So if we get to the research part, is there any research project, any study in particular that really stuck with you that was kind of a eye opener for you that steered maybe your career into a different direction or at least gave you some of the answers that you'd been looking for? Is there something that stands out when you look back at your academic work?
That's a great question. I would say because of its foundational effect early in my career, the study of zinc supplementation in Dhaka was really important. I think being involved in the design and the implementation of a study of that kind, there's so many aspects to it, so much that you learn as you go through that for the first time. So that was a very foundational experience. Subsequent to that, during my time here in Toronto, I got involved in a collaborative research network called the Hepatitis B Research Network. And that was also really important to me. It was fascinating to be involved, sitting around a table with researchers of varying experience, some extremely experienced, leading the whole thing, others just starting out, to be around the table with those people, planning studies, interpreting results, figuring out how to solve problems with the implementation of the research. Uh, just a great experience all around. So I got a lot out of that. I was involved in other research consortia as well, which also taught me lots. That one was important because ultimately later in my career, it sort of brought me back around through the hepatitis B aspect to global health, the connection to the WHO. And at a time in my career when I was looking for something different, that springboarded me out of academic medicine in the end and into where I am now.
Yeah, interesting. And we're going to get to that, but I'd like to hear because you mentioned the work for the WHO, and I was wondering how did that come about? Like, where did you already have any contacts in the organization, or how did you get in there? Because it seemed that this global health idea kind of got stuck with you.
Yeah, it for sure is in me, And for that middle section of my career after I arrived here in Toronto, I definitely got sidetracked into more of the sort of medical problems that we deal with here in the population around Toronto. But the global health thing was still very much within me. Um, the connection to the WHO came about as I was looking for something different in my career. So this is post-pandemic. I had worked my way into leadership positions in the hospital. The pandemic hit, and workloads went through the roof for many people. And as we got into late 2021 into 2022, I realized I was really ready for a change. And with a lot of reflection at that time, and making some changes in my work to make space for that reflection and to think about what I really wanted to do with this next stage in my career, the global health thing really bubbled back up to the surface as something that was in me. I really wanted to contribute to that, and I felt I hadn't fulfilled that in my career so far. So what did I do? I reached out to my network essentially, which I think is always such an important thing. And I met with people who were either friends or colleagues, closer or less close, professionally, to explore, how I might find a way forward. And um, I have to say, I often met with looks of great surprise and are you crazy and comments of that kind, because it is unusual later in a medical career to try to make such a significant change. And for sure, if you start talking about stepping out of academic medicine, where people often, at least here in North America, will work until they're 70 or more, it's an unusual thing to do. So amidst the incredulity, though, one person did suggest, why don't you connect with the WHO? They actually made a suggestion about a different committee, the Child Health Committee, I think it is, at the WHO. And when I looked at that, I realized my skill set didn't really overlap with that, but it enough, that I would be able to really contribute. But it planted the seed, and I realized there was also work being done in viral hepatitis, and that was something I really had a lot of experience in, both academically and clinically. And I think that was a strength that I could bring. So what I did was actually reach out to the people that ran this um, hepatitis B side of that particular division of the WHO, which is put together with viral hepatitis, HIV, sexually transmitted diseases. And as it turned out, the hepatitis B group were embarking on a new uh, update of the hepatitis B guideline. And I landed in their inbox at the perfect time, and was included into a pediatric group, so pediatric hepatitis working group alongside the main hepatitis B guidelines group, and subsequently became part of the main hepatitis B guidelines group, and actually became an important part of putting that chapter of the guideline together. So it was fortuitous, but it's just an example of how using your network can be really helpful, and how not being afraid to reach out to people and say, this is me, this is what I have to offer. Is there anything you can use there? Sometimes you land just at the right time and things happen.
Yeah, it sounds like it was a good fit, but I also always hear these stories in that in retrospect make absolute sense, right? But when you're there in the moment, everything's open, right? And you don't know what it's going to be like, and especially if you get like these surprised reactions from your colleagues, this might not be the most reassuring thing. And I wonder why you think that is. Like, why do you think people don't expect people to shift their careers once they are in academic medicine? Do you think there's like a more profound reason to it, or what do you think is the reasoning in the first place that people just expect you to stay the course there?
Oh, great question. I think there's probably a few things there. I mean, it's a cultural thing for starters. Medicine, I talk about it as an escalator. You graduate med school, you get on the bottom of the escalator, you gradually move up. Uh, it's an escalator. It's really tough to get off when you're halfway between the floors, and the top there, when you reach 70 or 80 years of age, you can step off easily. But along the way, it's difficult, really difficult to get off. There's a cultural aspect to that. I think there's also a value in medicine of the cumulative experience that you build. It is absolutely true to say that you never stop learning in medicine. In fact, the day you stop learning in medicine is the day you're running into trouble. You have to constantly update, constantly understand what's changing. And even just with the patients in front of you, you're constantly learning from them. And that wealth of experience that you build up through a career after 10, 20 years is incredibly valuable. So I think there are also good reasons why people stay in medicine, because that experience that they have is valuable to the patients and to the more junior members of the team who are learning from that. So I think those are the main sort of reasons. Medicine, however, stands very different to many other professions where a lot of that should also apply. Cumulative experience is going to be useful in any profession. I think medicine is slightly odd in the fact that it is so unusual to move out of the subspecialty. Um, Certainly here in North America and in the US in particular, people move jobs much more. They move cities, they move jobs more than I had seen in the UK, for example. So there is some movement, and because medicine's so broad, there are ways that you can adjust and grow your career into leadership, in and out of research, in and out of educational side of your role. So there are ways that you can change the career that I think maybe also satisfy some of that desire for change, and enable people to stay in the profession without feeling that they're becoming stale.
Yeah, interesting. So I agree with you on that, and I wonder if like if you go to a party and you tell people that you're a pediatrician, I would say that 10 out of 10 people would say, "Wow, this is something that really makes the world a better place," right? So I'm wondering, when did you decide that you wanna do even more than that? That well, first of all, you always influenced by the global health perspective, but when were you kind of introduced to the concept of effective altruism? When was the first time you heard about it? Was it even the name that came first, or was it more of a concept that you already heard somewhere else?
Um, it was late, actually, that I really came across the effective altruism movement and the organizations that it's made up of. Um, and it was during this time of looking for something outside of academic medicine. So when I started looking and I realized that I really wanted to explore this global health thing, I initially just my mind went to the big organizations that I've been very familiar with throughout my life. And they're fantastic organizations, Médecins Sans Frontières, um, Save the Children, Care International, these big organizations doing so much good work. And I guess, like many, had been aware of the idea that some charities are better than others, some charities use money better than others. But I was really still at the level of thinking, about the proportion that goes to programs versus administration as a way of evaluating a charity. Um, in reaching out to some of those organizations and their local setups here in Canada, um, I fairly quickly realized that actually it was going to be quite difficult for me to get a position in that sort of place. I had, yes, a lot of experience, and I believed I had transferable skills, but I also I'd spent my life doing something different, so I wasn't quite fitting the sort of narrow job descriptions that the large organizations have. So I started looking further, or continued looking further, and I just through exploring the internet came across effective altruism probably through 80,000 hours. I think was probably the first place that I landed, and this sparked my interest. And I read deeply in the 80,000 hours website through their handbook and the materials that they provide, and that started getting me out into the sort of ecosystem of organizations related to effective altruism.
And maybe for those listening who are not familiar with the concept, could you explain like what your takeaway was from that movement, and also maybe explain what the 80,000 hours website and book is about?
Sure. So what I took from this was there are different layers to this. The first, I guess, is that there is a range of pressing problems in the world. And I came at this through a global health sort of challenge. So I was focused on the fact that too many people die from diseases that ought to be avoidable or curable in the world, and that are avoided and cured in the global north, but less successfully in the global south, and that inequity that exists that gives rise to so many of those problems. So that's my route in. Um, in effective altruism, you see that that is, yes, a problem, but also there are multiple other problems related to other areas well beyond global health. And what they have in common is that they threaten um, lives that exist now or lives that might exist in the future, and the very existence of humankind in terms of where we might end up with artificial intelligence, for example. So the first thing was this breadth of problem areas, ranging from artificial intelligence through global health to animal welfare. So that was really interesting me. The second was that a nice way of framing the importance of lives. I'm talking again about the sort of global health aspect here, wherever they are, and really nicely put forward by some of the communications from Peter Singer earlier in the lifespan of effective altruism. And, if you worry about a child dying in your neighborhood, then you should worry equally about a child that's dying in Africa or South Asia or wherever they exist in the world. Um, And then the third level is the idea that charities can impact these problems at very different levels of effectiveness. So, um, and we're talking about a multiple of 100 or maybe even 1,000 times more effective if you look at the true kind of cost effectiveness of what that charity is doing, rather than just something simplistic like how much money are they using for administration versus their programs. Um, and that led me to the organizations like GiveWell that evaluate charities on that kind of basis and identify this selection of charities that can be highly effective at saving lives, where your money goes 100 or 1,000 times further in terms of making that big difference in the lives of people in the world now. Um, so um, I think those are several of the layers of learning that I took from that, and there's a depth and a breadth to it that's difficult to just summarize in a brief conversation like this.
Yeah, I absolutely. But it's good to get like a glimpse or an idea of what the movement is about. And yeah, as I mentioned before here, I noticed maybe also parallels to your fascination of mathematics, because I feel like what you mentioned, right? Not just saying it's good enough to donate to a charity and hoping for the best, but rather using all tools that are available to us and being more analytical about what the impact is that you can actually achieve with a certain amount of resources, be it like a set amount of dollars, say $100, like what impact can this $100 do if I donate it to charity X versus charity Y. Yeah, and also the aspect that I think sounded very central to me is what you mentioned. You mentioned Peter Singer, maybe the godfather, I don't know, of effective altruism and this thought experiment. I think the thought experiment initially had like a child drowning, and the question that Peter Singer would ask the audience was, would you jump in the water and save the child, even if it meant you ruin your expensive suit that you're wearing and you will be late to your very important meeting? And of course, there is no question that everyone would jump into the water and save that child, but the higher level question would be like, well, this is actually happening in different places in the world, so why should you care less if this happens in other areas in the world? And I found this very relatable, and think this is a very, to me at least, a foundational thought of kind of the movement and what explains it. Even though, like you mentioned, it's evolved, right? So also now other topics like threats of AI, etc., are being discussed. Maybe we can get back to that in a moment. But I'm wondering, like, ever since you've been kind of deeper in that movement and exposed to it more, has this changed your personal decisions? Has this, changed your everyday life? Like I've spoken to people who believe in this, right? And they said like sometimes it's hard when you think about if I go out to the movies or have a nice dinner for 50 or $100, um, what I could do with that money, what this money could do if I give it to like a highly effective organization. Sometimes these moments just kind of trickle down into your private life, and I wonder if this has occurred to you, and how do you deal with this ambiguity?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think actually it has been a positive, just through the very fact that it gives a way that helps me um, understand how I can help in a world where so much is going wrong and where there is so much every day in the news of suffering around the world. What are we supposed to do with that? You know, the average Joe. What are we supposed to do when we see that? It is so depressing and so um, anxiety provoking. And it is leads me to feel, well, what can I do about that? And what my understanding of effective altruism has led me to is a clear path where I can say, well, this is what I can do. And that's on, for me, a couple of levels. One is to understand what I can do with my career. And as I said, that sort of came up from within me. And this just helped to crystallize it and convince me that that feeling I had that I needed to change my career was exactly right. And it really supported me through those moments where people are saying, "Are you crazy?" To give me that inner strength to know, yes, this is the right thing and I'm not crazy. So that's number one. And number two, and you mentioned the money side of it, um, is to realize that actually, I can be more effective with my money. And this kind of more random donations that I had always given through my career, I could be much more organized around that. And that is. Has led me and my wife to pledge a proportion of what we earn to give to highly effective charities. So we do that through the Giving What We Can organization. And regularly now, each month, we give this proportion of what we've earned to highly effective charities. And that gives me a sense that, I've taken a little piece of control of what I can do, both through career and through my giving, to try to make more of an effective difference in the world. And I find that actually helpful. I know for some, it can go the other way and it becomes more of a negative thing because they're constantly second guessing what they're spending. And if they're spending something on something nice for themselves, then is that right? But I sort of see it the other way, and it's empowered me to feel that I have a way to make a difference.
Yeah, yeah, and probably a good way to see it, right? So because if you decide to make a contribution, also this kind of unlocks maybe a little bit of mental capacity to focus on other things once you've made this decision, and it doesn't need to be like a constant struggle, but it can be just kind of a well-informed decision to make. Um, I wanted to talk about like one thing that struck me a little bit when I started reading more about the effective altruism movement, is that it has evolved like from things that to me were very comprehensible, like the drowning child experiment that I mentioned, or also the idea of simple global health measures that absolutely make sense. There are measurable effects of, I don't know, distributing mosquito nets when trying to prevent malaria, and it makes sense to use math and to verify that this is actually true and to optimize for more effectiveness. But then this tangible way of looking at it has more evolved because things have got more complex, right? Now we have introduced a new technology with AI that is still largely unknown in terms of what it might lead to. There are pandemics that we've all experienced, right? And we've seen how devastating this can be. And with that, I think the movement has shifted to this like long-termist direction, which is a little less tangible and therefore kind of leaving a little bit of the initial promise of this like measurable effect more towards we're assuming that we can do good by making bets for the future. And to me, this is kind of a little bit of a conundrum because it's difficult to move away from this very predictable outcome to guesswork a little bit. And I wonder how you see it, and also the aspect of the sometimes like very shiny tech billionaires who claim this for their as their kind of personal project and pushing for with a lot of money for projects that they deem important and maybe taking a little bit the movement away from the community and rather steering it, having a few very wealthy people steer an overall good idea. And yeah, I'm just trying to say like there are some things that make this movement a little bit um, odd to me at times, and I wonder how you think about it as someone who knows a lot more about this and who knows maybe also a bit more the reasoning about for these different aspects of the movement.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think the way I can answer that is really based on what I prioritize things and what I can bring to the world. So that's how I sort of resolve this difficulty because in this effective altruism sort of mindset, if there is such a thing, um, there are and very smart people from philosophy background, from other types of background, have understood and explained how one can um, uh, identify and understand the importance of these long-termist kind of ideas. So the idea that artificial intelligence is maybe this massive and quite imminent threat to humankind, and therefore, we need to put enormous amount of resource into making the development of artificial intelligence safe. So I can understand how that thought process evolves. I can understand another area that people struggle with is the more extreme end of the animal welfare sort of side of effective altruism, um, minimizing suffering among shrimp, for example. How can we justify spending money on that when there are still hundreds of thousands of children dying from preventable diseases? So these are things that I can understand the thought process. When I look inside myself, what do I want to achieve with my life and my career? What's left of it? Um, I just instinctively come to the suffering that is around me now, that's here in the world now. And that is what for me is a priority. Now, having said that, I do believe that we all and mankind has always looked to the future. And what we do now has an eye to making things better for the future. And that is true in the sort of global health, pandemic preparedness, biosecurity areas that relate to health, that are mostly in my sort of sphere of interest. So yes, I see it a little bit like a career. So when you advise someone about their career, I think a key thing is to have a long-term goal and then figure out what are the small steps that you take in order to move yourself towards that long-term goal. And as your career goes on, that long-term goal may move and adjust. In fact, it almost certainly will. But you make those steps and keep trying to get to your long-term goal. It's a bit similar with long-termism, I think. We have a sense of where this long-termism threat is, what we need to take care of. But right now, really, what we can do is work on the smaller steps that head us in the right direction in that regard.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and I think also like you don't have to, in order to have the feeling or the urge to do something good, you don't have to identify with every aspect of a movement. And I think also, yeah, there's if there are parts that maybe don't they're not clear to you, then you can focus on other aspects. And I think one example also is being effective with your time, right? So some of the effective altruists would argue instead of going into medicine, you could pursue a job in finance or be like a crypto billionaire and make a lot of money there and donate it rather than spending your time helping people directly because it's more effective. But maybe not everyone can do that, right? So if you don't personally relate to that, and if this is not something where you can actually see yourself survive this kind of career because it just doesn't interest you, then obviously this is not something that you should pursue. And yeah, I think you have to kind of figure out which aspects are maybe applicable for your own life as well, rather than kind of see this very broad philosophy as like a one-to-one imprint for for you to copy.
Yeah, I think it's about finding your place, your individual place. And that comes, as I mentioned earlier, I really believe it comes from introspection and making space and time to think deeply about what it is that you have inside you. What are you good at? Where do you want your career and your life to contribute and to lead? Thinking carefully about that is key. It's difficult, you know. Um, there's a quote from Lao Tzu, and I will paraphrase it, that we all know what we want deep inside us. We all know what we want and where we want to be. And I think that is absolutely true. But the challenge is finding that in the midst of all the noise and distraction and busyness that modern life is composed of. So if you are, and for me and others that I work with in medicine, and many other careers are the same, of course, you are busy, busy. You know, you're working long days, thinking all the time about very important stuff at work. Um, it is difficult to find time to allow some hours to think about where your career is going. Um, and making space for that really important so that you can figure out from within you, you know, what is it that you've got to contribute? And that gives you strength in making those decisions, gives you confidence in making those career decisions. If you know from within that that's the right thing and that's where you personally can make your difference.
Yeah. And yeah, maybe this leads me to the topic of high impact medicine and which is a place where you actually help and empower people to do this. Maybe you can tell a little bit about what you work, what first of all what the organization does and what your part in this organization is.
Yeah, so High Impact Medicine is an organization that's focused on medical students and doctors. And it's really about more getting more doctors in the world to do more good for the big health-related problems. So what does that mean? It means that we reach out and identify people in the medical profession, from students onwards to late career, who are concerned about what they're seeing in the world, who want to make a difference, but are not clear on what their next steps should be to find their path forward to having more impact on these big problems. So we find those people and we support them in figuring out their pathway forward, what we talk about a pathway to impact. Um, and we deliver that through different things, primarily a career planning course, which is a 6-week online course where in a small group with a facilitator, you work through your approach to how you can adjust your career. And we offer some one-on-one mentoring over time, particularly to the people that are coming through that course. And what we aim to develop in the future is a sort of information hub within our website that will also help support the community of people that are working overtime to make those changes, knowing that it's not an overnight thing. It takes time to find the right way forward. So that's what we're about doing. We encourage people along the way to recognize how they can make a difference with their giving as well, and the potential to pledge and the impact that that side of things can have in parallel with any adjustments to their career that they may be making.
Yeah. And you mentioned the range between people who come to you goes from student to more experienced physicians. Who are the people? Like, can you maybe give some examples of stories of people who seek your advice? What are they what are they looking for? What kind of moments trigger in them the wish to change something in their career?
I think that I mean, there's a lot of variation, of course. Um, you know, people's stories vary for many different reasons, but the common threads, I think, are that sense that um, they want to do more than look after patients. Um, and that can hit people at different stages. Some people in med school are already seeing that if I just look after these patients for the rest of my life, it's not quite giving me what I want. some have a very clear understanding that they want to find their way into a position where they can make policy decisions that are going to affect thousands of people. And those sort of pathways can be clear to them, and we need to do relatively little to help them find their way forward. Some people are sort of lost after med school in a residency position, realizing that this isn't what they thought medicine was going to be like. Medicine's changing, right? It's a lot of computer work and relatively little patient-facing interactions in comparison to where it was some years ago. So there is this sort of generation of physicians in their early career who are seeing that in real time, that the medicine they thought they were going for is not what it turns out to be. And so often they're realizing that their impact is not the way they thought it would be, and how can they do something different to fulfill that desire. Um, and then there are some more mid-career people who have also found their way a certain direction down a career path, for example, in positions in global health. So we're a global organization. We have physicians who are interested in our organization from Nigeria, from Kenya, from the Philippines, from India. Um, and there are individuals there who may graduate med school, who move into working with organizations that are doing some public health programming, for example, around HIV care or TB care, and who then like the idea of growing that side of their career away again from sort of bedside medicine, and how do they find their pathway in their context. So many different types of individuals in different environments, different circumstances that we're trying to support to find those pathways forward.
And you're someone who has made a major shift throughout your career, right? So I assume that you can relate at least to some of the people and their motivations why they turn to you. And I wonder if you were in the position now to give yourself advice, your former self, maybe at the beginning of your career, would you what would you tell yourself to look out for throughout your career?
Um, we think there'd be three or four things. The first is to make time. This is something I learned when I came to Canada. Um, at the time, I don't know how it is now, but at the time in the UK, I went through my training, I got my consultant job, and I realized within a year or two of taking that job that that was it. I was basically in a job that wasn't going to significantly change for the rest of my career, and that I was in my, I don't know, early 30s, mid 30s, probably at the time, and nobody was interested. I came to Canada, and once a year, I had a meeting with my division head, and we went through my goals for the next year, and that really was meaningful to me, and it made me set aside a day where I would plan for that meeting. So I'd clear my calendar for a day and plan for it. Um, and that makes an enormous difference. So first piece of advice to myself would be to do that, to make space every year to plan around goals and to think about my career. And a day in those days was good. Now I would advise to do that more regularly and with more time. That's number one. Um, Number two is that power of your network, and how building a strong and extensive network of colleagues and acquaintances and friends that can advise you and guide you and help you in different circumstances is really, really important. When it comes to getting a job, your network is the most successful way, and cold job applications much less so. So that's The second thing, around networking. And the third, I think, is to realize that your career is a journey, and have a sense of that long-term goal that you're aiming for, but also enjoy the fact that it's a journey. Don't get stressed by the idea that you can't move directly from your current position to that dream job that you want. You have to build towards these things usually, and sometimes you make those best guesses at what your steps should be, and it takes you in an unexpected direction, and that's the beauty of life and the beauty of a career journey. There are twists and turns, and it's a long-term story. So don't get stressed if you're not seeing yourself in that dream position immediately. Things evolve over time.
Thank you. That's great advice. And certainly I learned a lot today, Simon. So thank you very much for taking the time and sharing your story here.
You're very welcome. It's been a pleasure to chat with you, Carl.
Thank you for listening to Medical Portraits. If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more inspiring stories from the world of medicine, make sure to subscribe to the podcast. See you in 2 weeks.